This podcast was recorded using Uber Conference by Dialpad.
Hello, this is Don Witt with the Channel Daily News from TelecomReseller. Today we are speaking with Jim Dalton. He is the founder of TransNexus. How are you doing today, Jim?
Don, I'm doing great, thanks.
Jim, we've known each other for a long time. You're one of the old pros in the channel, and you've been very successful over that period of time. And maybe you could give our listeners a little background of TransNexus and the products that you have there.
Sure. Yeah, Don, thanks for that. So just a big, quick background on TransNexus. Gosh, we started over 20 years ago, really initially offering a routing engine for voice over IP networks. And that business has grown into really a platform that we still sell today called NexOSS, which is a whole suite of applications for managing SIP trunking services. And gosh, the last 5 years, really the big growth engine for us has all been about fraud detection. And we're kind of unique in terms of all the fraud detection solutions out there because, you know, from my days at Bell South decades ago, fraud analysis has always been done on call detail records. And that works. We got started doing it that way, and it's the tried and true method. But, you know, it's just too slow compared to what's possible through SIP analytics. And what we do, which is kind of different in our NexOSS platform and our new platform I'll describe in just a moment, is that we look at each SIP invite for every call and analyze it for fraud. And so it gives us the ability to detect fraud before it even the call is even set up. And that's a huge advantage compared to call detail record analysis, because with call detail records, you have to wait for the fraudulent calls to end. Then you have to collect the call detail records, analyze the calls, and to detect the fraud. And in that time, a lot of fraud can occur.
That was literally a huge problem with VoIP when it was starting out. I mean, the fraud was burying some businesses and carriers with huge amounts of used time and minutes that they had no revenue for, and they couldn't pay for a lot of them. So, I mean, what you're talking about is the early days. I mean, that was huge, and a lot of people are still trying to detect it the same way. Amazing. Can you go on?
Sure. Yeah. Well, Don, it's still an issue, and you know, I think carriers have gotten a little bit wiser about how to deal with it, and but still, for example, I had a call a couple of months ago. Somebody called. They've had a fraud management system. It was based on call detail records. Everything was working as expected, but they had several $1,000s worth of fraud over a weekend. And, you know, the use case was what their case was is, you know, the bad guy got in, he started pumping calls to some country in Africa, and the calls lasted about 15 minutes. He collected call detail records after every 5 minutes. So on average, you know, about 17 and a half minutes passed before he got the first CDR for a bad call. Well, in that time frame, the bad guy had been setting up about 12 calls a minute. So there were already a lot of calls in progress. And this particular service provider, he couldn't cut those. He couldn't tear down those calls. He could block future calls, and he did that. But all the calls in progress, he couldn't stop, and you know they continued on. Meanwhile, as soon as he started blocking calls to that first country, the fraudster repeated it to another country. So it was kind of like whack-a-mole all weekend. Fraud systems working just as expected. This service provider rather, couldn't block international calls from his customer because, well, that would have been unacceptable, and he ends up with about $3,000 worth of fraud. And that's pretty common. You know, a lot of people just say, hey, that's not too bad, because they've experienced tens of thousands of dollars of loss in the past, and it's just kind of a cost of doing business. And with SIP analytics, you completely eliminate those kind of fraud losses. And it's great. It's just a natural integration with a SIP network. Basically, you point your SIP traffic to our platform, and we respond whether either to route the call or block the call or divert the call based on our fraud analysis. So it's a very simple integration. It's quick and it's easy, and the payback is a couple of months, if not faster.
In your analytics, do you develop a pattern of calling for the particular customer and base future calls on that, or something being deviant, or how do you do it?
I mean, that's just exactly the way we do it. When a call comes in, we look at the fraud score. So we're not just counting calls, we're looking at the fraud score, the riskiness of the called location. And when that call comes in real time, we compare, what's the fraud score for this call in the previous 5-minute window and the previous 60-minute window. So these are two sliding windows that we look at. So what's the fraud score look like in those two time periods? And we can compare those fraud scores for the previous 5-minute window, 60-minute window for the dialed country code for the equivalent time period in the 12 previous weeks. And from the previous periods, we know what the average fraud score has been. We know what the standard deviation is. We know what what a fraud threshold we calculate automatically would be to prevent false positives. And if the fraud score in the current time exceeds our threshold, then it's clearly fraud. And so we can signal back. We definitely log the event and alert it. We can block the call, like I said, or we can divert it to another destination. And it's really kind of that simple, and it works great. And what our customers like is the diversion feature we've added, where we provide as part of our solution a CAPTCHA gateway, and this is really good for robocalls. So if we detect, this looks like robocalls coming in, you don't necessarily want to block calls to your subscribers, but we can divert those to a CAPTCHA gateway. And what a CAPTCHA gateway is basically it's a VoIP platform where we route the suspicious call to the caller. Here's a recording. To complete your call, please enter the 2-digit code. We play a random 2-digit code. A real person is going to enter it, and the call gets forwarded to the called party. Where if it's a machine, it can't enter the code. We hang up, and that's the end of the call. So it's really two great solutions we offer. One for toll fraud, where you want to just block the call, but also for inbound calls, where you want to protect your customers from malicious machine-generated calls, where we use the CAPTCHA gateway.
So those are some pretty key differentiation factors from some of the other fraud detection packages out there. I don't know that I've heard that before.
Yeah, Don, you're absolutely right. I'm not aware of anybody else in North America that's using SIP analytics to block calls in the way that we are. There's some people that use deep packet inspection, and that works as well. You're looking at the packets as they come in, but now you've identified fraud. What do you do? And you've got to work out some way to automatically block or divert that call. And when you do deep packet inspection, that can be done, but it's kind of a complicated integration to integrate with SBCs. Our approach, where we integrate directly with SBCs or soft switch, we just send back a SIP message that indicates how the call should be treated: block, let it pass, or divert the call. And it is a big differentiator. I think we have a better mousetrap for handling fraud detection, and SIP analytics is unique in how we've done that.
Who are your target customers for the software that you have?
Don, it's the service providers, the retail service providers in particular, who get stuck with these bills. They know how to run a secure network, but their customers are the risk. And so the retail service providers, they sell SIP trunking services to their enterprise customers. Enterprise service customers get hacked, and they start pumping, SIP calls to wherever. So we have to protect our retail service provider networks, and that's really is our number one target market. But we're getting more and more interest from enterprises, because if a big enterprise gets hacked, they will be held accountable for the bill, and so they need protection. Their service providers aren't going to let a Fortune 1000 company off the hook for a bunch of fraudulent calls. So we do have a growing number of enterprise customers that use us not only just for fraud protection, but also for the reporting features that we provide.
Do you have a direct sales channel? How is all of that set up?
Don, we don't sell directly. We sell, basically, people find us over the web through inbound marketing. That's really the primary source that people become aware of that. Also through our vendor partners who send people to us and their customers who have a fraud solution. So we work with Metaswitch, we work with BroadSoft, we work with Oracle. We're well integrated with all those platforms, and they'll recommend customers to us when they have an issue with fraud. And but we will be growing into selling through a channel directly for looking at to companies that sell telephone systems that want to add fraud detection and reporting as a value add to their customers.
We reach a lot of resellers, a lot of large enterprise, and thousands of carriers as well. Pretty much every one of those categories will potentially want to talk to you because they've all got this problem of fraud. How can they find out more?
Don, they just need to contact us at TransNexus. Go to our website, transnexus.com, and fill out the form to get more information. And one great thing, let me just tell you about our latest initiative. What I didn't mention is our Clear IP platform. This is all cloud-based SIP analytics, fraud detection that we offer. So literally, we can have a customer protected for fraud within an hour. It's all based on the cloud. You send us your SIP invites, and we're going to send back a response of how the call can be routed. It's great for resellers. It's a simple integration, and it's easy to get into business and start generating monthly revenue.
Excellent. This is Don Witt with the Channel Daily News from Telecom Reseller, speaking with Jim Dalton. He is the founder of TransNexus. And Jim, it sounds like you're going to be one of those superheroes saving the day for a lot of our organizations from the rampant fraud that's out there today.
Great. Thanks, Don.